Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is the day after talking Duck Sports with Randy the War Duck. And we had a game over the weekend, and we'll talk about that in a minute. The few things I want to cover before we get to the Oregon game. And one of those things is the Dan Lanning Rule. So for those of you that don't know, with 10 seconds left in the Ohio State-Oregon game, Dan Lanning calls a timeout. Dan Lanning decides it's a passing down. He puts a bunch of DBs in the backfield, having 12 men on the field, and Ohio State doesn't see it, and therefore they go along with the play, and that play ends in a incomplete pass and runs 4 seconds off the clock. They accept the 5-yard penalty. With 6 seconds left, Ohio State runs out of time, and Oregon wins the game. So, NCAA gets mad at Oregon, and they don't like that. They're embarrassed because this young coach outsmarts all of the NCAA and their referees. And Urban Meyer even said that he never thought about doing something like that, that he gave Dan Lanning a lot of credit for thinking of a way to use that rule. And so Steve Shaw from the NCAA Referees Committee, or whatever it's called, 4 days later changes the rule on Dan Lanning. And now the Dan Lanning rule is in effect. Now the rule is under 2 minutes, that if a substitution violation or too many men on the field violation occurs and the offense wants to accept that penalty, then they will accept the penalty, move the yards, and then that team will have the option to reset the game clock to the previous time. My thing about that is there's already a method for that. If the Ohio State was smart enough or on the ball enough, that they would have just spiked the ball, caused the thing, and really no time would have run off the clock, maybe 1 second instead of 4. And it really wouldn't have made a difference. But they didn't. They decide 4 days later to change the game, and I'm starting to wonder if this was UNLV versus Ohio State, or if this was Tulane versus Montana, or something to that effect. Would this have been changed 4 days later? I don't think so. In fact, I would wager to say that if Ohio State had pulled this off against Oregon and beat Oregon, I don't think the rule would have been changed mid-season in 4 days. In fact, if Texas and Georgia, which just played last night, or Alabama and Tennessee, that if Alabama or Georgia or Texas had used this to their advantage, I still don't think the rule would have been changed on Wednesday. I think this is an overreaction by the NCAA not to talk about it at the end of the year. I think this is, they're mad that they were embarrassed. They're mad that this upstart young Dan Lanning outsmarted all of them. And I think that's why they changed the rule. Let me know what you think in the comments, but that's just the way I see it. All right, moving on. Let's get to some more stuff here. We're going to take a look at the Big Ten standings. Right now, the Big Ten, we got Indiana Hoosiers sitting at the top at 4-0. We got Oregon at 4-0 and Penn State at 3-0. We got Illinois still in the mix at 3-1. We got Wisconsin still in the mix at 3-1. Ohio State Buckeyes at 2-1. And then Iowa at 2-2. Washington Huskies at 2-2. Michigan at 2-2. And Michigan State 2-2. Nebraska at 2-2. And Minnesota 2-2. All right, a lot of 2-2 teams. Okay, so who's really in the mix? Yeah, Indiana, Oregon, Penn State, and I think Ohio State. Those 4 teams are in the mix for the Big Ten title game. But I think Washington, USC, and UCLA may be regretting their move to the Big Ten. I'm thinking all 3 of those teams would have rather be in the Pac-12 right now. Washington sitting at 2-2 in the Big Ten, 4-3 overall, is already out of the Big Ten Conference. They're pretty much out of the playoff talking points there. And looking at their schedule at 4-3, they may not. Either if they get to bowl eligibility, it'll be because they're 6-6, If they don't get there, I won't be surprised, because if you look right now, they're losing to Indiana, they're losing to Penn State, and they're losing to Oregon. So that's 6 losses right there. The only way they get to bowl eligibility is they got to beat USC, and USC needs to beat Washington to get to bowl eligibility. So whatever team wins this game, I think maybe gets to bowl eligible, and the other one does not. UCLA, I don't know. I think Washington could probably beat them, but UCLA is starting to find some offense, so I don't know. But if you look at USC, they're not any better. USC sitting at 3-4 overall. They need to get 3 straight wins somewhere. I think they get Rutgers. I think they can beat Washington. Nebraska, I don't know. UCLA, probably, but it's a rivalry game. And then they got Notre Dame, which I don't know. USC has all the talent in the world to win those games, but they collapsed in the fourth quarter against Minnesota, collapsed in the fourth quarter against Penn State, and collapsed in the fourth quarter against Maryland. So I don't know. I don't know where USC finds enough wins to get bowl eligible, but they are not looking good, and people are going to start talking about Lincoln Riley, because let's be honest, this is what Lincoln Riley's is. These are starting to be his players that he's recruiting, right? Because before he inherited that team. So now this is starting to be his players. This is his quarterback. So there's going to be some rumblings in USC if they can't right this ship. But if they were in the Pac-12, if USC was still in the Pac-12, I'm thinking they maybe have, I don't know, 1 loss, and they're still fighting for a playoff spot. But I don't know. You got UCLA, and they got, I don't know. Even if I don't see them running the table in the end here. I mean, I guess they could and still get bowl eligible to get, 4 games in a row or 4 games in there. They got one that I think they can easily win against Fresno State. Nebraska, I don't think so. Iowa, I don't think so. And USC, and I don't think so. I think USC is going to be a bottom dweller. I think they're going to be a bottom dweller for a while. And so they may be regretting their leave from the Pac-12 because, they get a little more money, but now you're competing with all these other teams, and I don't know where they're going to go from there. It just makes it that much harder. We'll take a look at Indiana here. Indiana sitting at 4-0 in the Big Ten, at 7-0 overall. I think they beat Washington. I think they beat Michigan State. Michigan won't be ranked after today. And then they play Ohio State. I think that Ohio State game, I think Indiana is undefeated when they go to the Horseshoe and play Ohio State for a spot in the Big Ten title. I think this game here may decide whether Indiana gets into the Big Ten title game or not. I think Indiana does make the playoff as an at-large team. So there's that. I don't think you can leave a 1-loss Indiana team off in the playoff. I think they do make it, because I don't see Indiana losing another game here. I mean, no team has slowed them down really at all. I mean, Jesus. 42, 52, 42, 41, 56 on Nebraska. That was supposed to have the 6th ranked defense. I don't see Washington slowing them down. I don't see Michigan State slowing them down. I definitely don't see Michigan slowing them down. Maybe Ohio State, but you're going to have to outscore Indiana. And Ohio State lost one of their offensive linemen to a broken leg during the Oregon game for the season, so they lost a starter there. And sometimes that's really difficult to replace, especially as you start getting later on in the season, because of depth. And so we'll have to see how Ohio State holds out, if their depth can hold out. But I think Indiana's for real. I think Kurt Signietti, I probably butchered that, but I think he's probably the coach of the year in the NCAA. It's just my point of view. All right, Penn State schedule. At Wisconsin, and then they got Ohio State. This is very dangerous because they might be looking ahead to that Ohio State game, and you can't overlook Wisconsin. Wisconsin has now been able to find some offense, and they've scored 52, 42, and 23 in their last 3 games. And so they could be a dangerous team for Penn State if you're overlooking them and looking at Ohio State. If they can get past Ohio State, they got Washington, Purdue, Minnesota, and Maryland. I don't see them losing any of those games. And here, from my own personal perspective, I hope Ohio State beats Penn State here, because that puts Penn State with a loss, that puts Ohio State with a loss, and that puts Indiana in the driver's seat for the Big Ten title game. All they have to do is beat Ohio State and they're in, lose to Ohio State and they're out. And then the winner, and then it'd be an Oregon-Ohio State rematch, which I'm also okay with, because I think Oregon simply outplayed Ohio State, even though the score didn't reflect what the game probably was. All right. So if we look at Ohio State's remaining schedule, they got Nebraska. They go to Penn State, which is pretty dangerous. And then they got Purdue, Northwestern, Indiana, and Michigan. No easy task, but I don't think Ohio State can't overlook Nebraska getting to Penn State. It's kind of that same thing, right? I thought it was. Oh, so Ohio State goes to Penn State. Okay, right. So Indiana goes to. Okay, all right, there we go. All right, so at home, Penn State, they're pretty darn tough. Ohio State's gonna have to play a flawless game. But my fear is Penn State beats Ohio State, and Indiana beats Ohio State, and then you have 3 undefeated teams. And I think they take the 2 highest teams in the rankings, which would be Oregon and Penn State, which means an undefeated Indiana would get left out, and that'd be a travesty. But you never know. We'll see what happens there. All right. So, all right. Go ahead and take a look at this matchup here. So Oregon gets a huge win against Ohio State at home. They go on their road on a short week on a Friday game, and they go to Purdue and play Purdue, where Purdue has a different kind of defense. They're very they hide what they're doing very well, and they have been known to take down number 2 teams before in the past. That's a historical aspect. So Oregon's going on the road, flying all the way over there, and then taking on Purdue on a Friday night game. And you just didn't know how Oregon was going to react after that giant emotional win against Ohio State. But Oregon comes in, they absolutely dominate Purdue. Even though it wasn't the cleanest game, it was a dominant performance by the Ducks. The first shutout since 2012, 12 years ago, and the first road shutout in 22 years. Or 32 years since 1992. So that's 32 years. So 32 years for a road shutout and 12 years for a shutout. Oregon finally gets one, and they didn't play perfect, and they're without one of their best players. So that's a good sign for Oregon, keeping focused. Now, I thought the Oregon defense was a little unfocused in the first half. I thought that the tackling was not there. A lot of missed tackles, a lot of people with their hands on guys that just weren't bringing them down. I thought in the second half, Oregon's tackling got much better, and Oregon was able to get the shutout. And that's, like I said, it's been a long time. It's long enough that I actually had to look it up because I didn't really remember how long it had been. It had been so long that I just couldn't remember. Normally a team gets a field goal or something like, or a late touchdown in scrub time. But let's take a look at these stats. Oregon gets 25 first downs. They go 5 for 9 on third down efficiency, a little over, what's that, 57% or something like that. Got 1-1 for fourth down, rushing yards 131, passing yards 290, yards per game. They got of course you couldn't see that. So all right, yards per passing yards 290, yards per game 421. Oregon gets 3 sacks and could have had more if the tackling had been a little better or Jordan Birch had been there. They got 1 interception, 2 punts, and 4 penalties for 25 yards. I think if Oregon can keep penalties under 4 penalties a game, that's probably their sweet spot. I think if you get any more than that, then it's just not a good day for Oregon. All right, so time possession is really only 4 seconds off. I thought that was pretty impressive. Is looking at the scoreboard, it just shows you that Oregon's defense can have teams put up some drives and still stop them when they have to. So let's see here. So Dylan Gabriel goes 21 of 25. What is that? 80%, 290 yards, 11.6 yard average. They get 2 TDs and he gets intercepted 1 time. And that interception to me was something that happens to Dylan Gabriel when his feet aren't set. Not that that matters too much because he's still pitching 77% overall. Even through 7 games, he's still at 77% completion rate. But I think Dylan Gabriel's weakest spot is when his feet aren't set. Not that, like I said, not that that's a huge deal, but when his feet are set, that guy is one of the most accurate quarterbacks on anywhere on the field that there is in the NCAA. And I think the Noah Whittington pass was the epitome of that. When Dylan's feet are set, he puts the ball where it absolutely has to be for his guy to get it and get the reception. So Noah Whittington is running toward the corner left side of the end zone. He turns around and backpedals as the ball gets thrown. And the guy's helmet's like right here. The ball is thrown just over the helmet, just so he can catch it. He catches the ball, pins it against his face mask, his helmet, and then gets 1 foot in and falls, lands on his back. The ball secured. It's a touchdown. One of the most amazing catches by a running back that I've seen, and an amazing play by both Dylan Gabriel because the pass could not have been anywhere else at all. If it had been a little lower, it would have hit the defensive player in the back of the head. If it was any higher, because of how the defensive player was on Whittington, I don't think that Whittington could have got high enough to grab that ball. It was absolutely in the perfect spot, and Noah Whittington made the perfect play. If he had tried to bring it down, I think he loses the ball. But he pins that on his face mask and lands and is able to secure the ball. Such a great play. Should look up that highlight. All right. So that's enough said about Dylan and his interception. Oregon rushing. Well, actually, I don't think I talked about it. So the interception happened. Dylan Gabriel's running to the left, and on the run, he throws the ball. It has a little too much on it. The defensive player behind the receiver was out of position to make a play on the receiver, but was in perfect position to grab the overthrown ball. And that's just like my point, right? If Dylan's feet are set, he's on the money. If they're not set, he's still 77% overall. So it's not like he can't make his throws. Every once in a while, one gets away from him. That's okay. It didn't hurt us in this example. Our defense was playing lights out. All right, back to the rushing game. 131 yards overall. Oregon didn't need to do a lot here over the game. They just didn't have to. They had short fields all day. But Jordan James does 10 carries for 50 yards, 5 average, 2 TDs. 10 yard was his long. I'm glad he didn't carry 23 times in this game. Noah Whittington, I thought this was his best game. 9 carries, 42 yards, 4.7 average for a log of 20. I thought he looked like we've expected him to look, and I thought he played very well in this game. I hope this is a step forward for him. I hope from here on out that that's what we get to see. We got to see for the first time Jay Harris out there, and he gets his first ever touchdown, and his first ever touchdown as a Duck. He has 7 carries for 32 yards, 4.6 average. I thought he played really well. He had a long of 12 yards. Jaden Lamar has been doing great every time he gets in there. 3 carries, 20 yards, 6.7 average for 11 long. Dylan Gabriel tried to run 5 times. I thought Purdue was very much keen on him, making sure that he did not run and did not hurt them. And really, Dylan Gabriel had a 12-yard run, but really just didn't have much in the run game. Seemed like they were stopping it every time. Evan Stewart is just on a tear right now. That guy gets 4 receptions and still almost has a 100-yard game. He gets 96 yards, 24-yard average. No TDs in this game, but he had a 49-yarder. Tez Johnson has 7 catches for 66 yards, 9.4 average, and 1 TD along with 16. Tez Johnson and Stewart are just fantastic receivers right now. So, okay. Kenyon Sadiq and Justice Lowe. Justice Lowe and Jeremiah McKellen played because Trayshawn Holden did not play. As part of his punishment, obviously, Dan Lanning is holding them out of this game. I don't know how many games they're going to hold him out. I'm hoping this is it. I think his punishment was served enough in the Ohio State game, getting kicked out and not being a part of that game, and then having to deal and really be man up and apologize to your teammates for being selfish. I think, he's just a young man, and I think he learned his lesson. But Dan Lanning held him out of this game, and so hopefully we see him return next week. But who knows? That's an ongoing situation. So Kenyon Sadiq played because Terrence Ferguson apparently had to have his appendix removed. And I thought Kenyon Sadiq played very well. I thought his blocking was done well. He had 2 receptions for 58 yards, 29-yard average, and a long rumble for 39 yards. I thought he played extremely well, that we didn't really miss Terrence's production, even though you can't really replace the production that Terrence Ferguson has. Terrence Ferguson is always there when you need him to be there, and so we send him support. I hope he gets well soon. I'm expecting him to be out probably 2 or 3 weeks, because if you have surgery, you need stitches, and those stitches usually stay in for 2 weeks. And then I don't know what kind of recovery he's going to need after that. But I hope he's doing well. We wish Terrence Ferguson the best, and hopefully we see him back soon. In the meanwhile, Kenyon Sadiq gets to step up and play a bigger role, and I'm glad to see that he played well yesterday. All right, Justice Lowe has 2 receptions, 28 yards, 16 long. Noah Whittington had 4 catches, 24 yards, 6 average for a long and 11, and an amazing touchdown catch. If you haven't seen that, you need to go find it. It was a great touchdown catch. One of the best I've seen by running back. Jeremiah McKellen gets in, 1 reception, 12 yards, 12-yard average, long as 12. James catches 1 for 6 yards and a long as 6. So there's your stats for this game. Like I said, I thought the offense played fairly focused. Just the one mistake by Dylan Gabriel when he was on the run. Otherwise, I thought the Oregon offense played pretty well, and they were pretty efficient. Still, Oregon just can't seem to score in the third quarter. That's kind of been a thing for Oregon for some reason. I don't know why that is, but they have just not scored in the third quarter this year. And that middle 8, where Dan Lanning likes to win, I think we're winning the first 4, and it's the second 4 that we need to pick up to get that middle 8. Overall, I thought the defense played well, other than the sloppy tackling in the first half. I thought the second half was much better, much more focused. So with that, let's see. So coming up next for Oregon's schedule, we got Illinois, Michigan, Maryland, Wisconsin, and then Washington. Out of all these games, I think the threat level is highest for Wisconsin because of the November 6th, apparently 11 a.m. kickoff. It could just be very cold. It could be wet. It could be snowy, but it's going to be cold, and the weather could be a factor in the pass game. and could be more of a running thing. That fits into Wisconsin's wheelhouse. Not that Oregon can't run, but I think Oregon still wins, but I think this threat level is a little higher because of the weather and the type of game that it might be. It might just be a low scoring game because of the weather. And in low scoring games, you never know what can happen. It takes one slip up in a close game, and next thing you know, you're behind. But Oregon goes to 7-0, 4-0. I think this is the first time since like 2000 and maybe 13 when Oregon was ranked number 1, and they played Auburn in the championship game, lost to Auburn in the championship game. But Oregon's season's looking good. I think they can run the rest of the table here and finish the regular season 12-0. Which would be maybe the first time in Oregon's history that happens, because I can't think of another time they went undefeated. They had the one chance there. I can't remember what year it was. Joey Harrington was there, but they lost to Stanford, even though they had a huge lead. That was their only loss. And then finished second in the rankings to Nebraska, even though Nebraska had lost. But with that being said, we're going to get out of here. And Oregon should be number 1 when the rankings come out. I think Penn State is number 2. I think they put Georgia at number 3 and Tennessee and Texas at number 4. No. Sorry. I think it's Oregon number 1, Penn State number 2, Georgia number 3 as the first one-loss team, as you just took down number 1. And then I think it's Ohio State, and then I think it's Texas. And so I think that's your top 5: Oregon, Penn State, Georgia, Ohio State, and Texas. I think Georgia does jump Ohio State as they just took down the number 1 team. Hope to see you guys next time. Make sure you comment. What do you think about the Dan Lanning rule? What do you think about Oregon being number 1? And what team do you think gives Oregon the biggest threat for the rest of the season? Much love all. We'll catch you next time.